statistics in that course,
Yes, but you guys, I know that some people are really afraid of that. But we're gonna be on the same page, especially if you looked at the.
Like you make it real fun, like the lecture.
Yeah.
It's very exciting. But once you get to the book, it's like, okay.
That's exactly how I felt when I read the book. My mouth dropped open. I'm like,
it's like, what are they talking about?
be with me. I agree. No, I agree. I'm reading this. I'm like, why? Okay, I wish somebody would write a statistics book for people who aren't math geeks, right? I took a statistics course in graduate school, and he would just say, well, it's intuitive. I'm like, for you maybe, right? Like he does math, like maybe, why, he said you should just know why this formula is the way it is and why it would come up with this number. And I'm looking at the formula, I'm like, it's just Greek. So what number do I put in here? I'm not like putting a lot of meaning into it. I get it. We need like people who are interested in statistics that could talk to anybody about it, explain what it means in a way that they can understand and how it's relevant to the purposes of their life and their job. And that's what I'm trying to do in this class. So in the book, in the next chapter or two, it's like correlation and regression, and they're telling you how to calculate by hand a regression. That's what it says in the book. I'm not having you guys do that, okay? Because you've already taken a statistics class about how to do this by hand. You will never have to do a regression by hand in the future. Ever. Ever. Right? Ever. Most of you probably won't even be doing statistics later on. If you're in therapy, it's not like you're crunching numbers. And if you are going to a PhD program and doing research, you're doing it on the SPSS, and it's more important for you to be able to understand how to put that into this computer software and how to interpret the results that are coming out. For the purposes of this class, we have to talk some about statistics, and don't get too worried about the book. Wait for me to talk about it in class and see if I'm able to help you understand these concepts a little better, and if you're still struggling, say so and come to my office. I want you to be on the same page. We're not going to go as in-depth as the book, and I'll let you know what I want you to know and what I don't want you to know. But I want you to be able to, because most people in here are going to be clinicians, being able to understand how statistics relate to assessment and measures. If I'm evaluating, a measure, how do I know that it's, good or bad, whether we should use it or not? What are the pros and cons of using the Rorschach, the zinc block test? If some people are using it, why might that be, difficult? Or why would you want to do that? I want you to start thinking about those things, which is why we're doing the journal articles. Why we're doing the journal articles in here. We're doing one together as a class first before I have you guys do your own one. Just as practice, and that's why I'm having you do it 4 times, and that's why I'm going to give you feedback on it, because I don't expect you guys to do, the best you can on the first one. That's what I hate about you. Have you ever had a class that you have like one research paper at the very end or something like that, one major project? And when do you get the feedback on that? At the very end, and then you're like, well, I'm already done. I can't even improve what I did because it's already over. That's why we have 4 of them. So I give you feedback, and your second one should be better. Your third one should be better. The fourth one, you should be pretty good at evaluating like some of these like self-report measures in particular, some of these easier ones. You should be able to be like, oh, they're using a regression right here or a correlation, and they're saying that, the retest reliability is good because this correlation is high, and this is what that means. I don't expect you to know that now, but I want you to be able to know that by the end of the semester. Okay? So don't get too worried about it yet. We're going to be on the same page. So last time we talked about the difference between a population versus a sample. Who can tell me what that difference is using maybe an example of your own? Who could use an example to explain the difference between a population and a sample?
Okay, so population would be college students, and then maybe a sample would be a specific university or just a university that maybe has a general composition of college students.
Okay, this is a really good point. Okay. Whether something is a population or a sample depends on what your question is, right? So I could say my question could be, I wonder, let me think. I wonder what political affiliations students at Pan Am have, right? So the population are the students at Pan Am. That'll be our population, right? So I could sample everybody at Pan Am about that, And if I sample everybody for that question, that would be the population, right? But if I'm doing a sample, say, there's no way I could ask over 20,000 students, so I'm going to do a subset of that. My sample is going to consist of 500 instead of 20,000. But you could do the same question. My question could be, I wonder what political affiliations are of college students across the United States. And that's the population. So I'd have to ask if I wanted to do a study that looked at just the population, I'd have to ask every college student in the United States that question. But that's unlikely. So my sample would be a subset of that population. But we can't just say that like all college students or college students at PAM, that alone determines whether it's a population or sample. It's in reference to the question being asked. Does that make sense? Are we on the same page?
Population depends on the question.
What?
So the population depends on the question you're asking.
Right, whether it's a population or sample. Who can give me another example?
So population is like a question that consists of a lot of people, like a big population.
A population would be like everybody that it would affect. Like, I want to know what political affiliation is most of the college students in the United States. So the population is the college students of the United States. It's very rare for a psychology study to look at the whole population because it's very hard to measure everybody in the population. It's rarely the case that you would get the whole population. And that's one of the big things about statistics, particularly inferential statistics, which I think is back one, where they take a sample from a known population, so a sample of college students from across the country, and then use statistics to infer what it would be like across the population. Okay. So sample is a subset of the population, because normally we wouldn't have access to so many people, right? And then we come to the scales of measurement. And again, this is what we're using in our studies. Like we said, how do you measure the quality of a presentation in the class? Because you guys are giving presentations, and I'm going to be giving you guys some grades. A lot of people would want to know, like, how are you evaluating that? Is it like on a Likert scale? Who could tell me what a Likert scale is?
That's why you go from 1 to 10.
Yeah, it could be 1 from 10 or 1 from 5. For example, like, how satisfied are you with your education at Pan Am? Like 5, extremely satisfied. 1, very dissatisfied. It's like a range, and you pick like a number like that. So that could be one way that we measure.
Surveys, you know, like the Whataburger surveys, how satisfied are you with the meal you got?
Exactly. Right, exactly. You see that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like one scale of measurement. If we're doing pounds as a scale of measurement, we're doing weight or doing height. There are all these different sorts of scales, but they're all not created equal. Depending on the scales that we choose in our studies depends on what kind of statistical analyses that we can use. So we're going over, there's like 4 different scales, and the scales depend on certain properties. So the properties are magnitude, equal intervals, and absolute 0. Right? And what are the 4 scales of measurement? Nominal, ordinal, right. And each of them have different ones of these properties, right? So that's why this is important. So we're having these scales, and I want you guys to be able to know the scales and what properties they contain, and why does that matter? What properties they contain on the scale? What kind of statistical tests you can use. Okay. Is everybody with me so far? Anybody confused? Okay. Somebody said a question? Okay. So one is the magnitude, the moreness, like people in here are different weights, different heights. We can, the equal intervals. If you have that, differences among the same amount of points on a scale are equal. So like on a ruler, like 2 and 4 is the same as 10 and 12. Those are equal intervals. But like I said, there's some controversy in the field about whether or not some of the psychological tests or most psychological tests have these equal intervals because the meaning isn't the same. Like the meaning on inches on a ruler is the same, but the difference of 5 IQ points between like 110 and 105, which are higher IQ, versus lower IQs 45 and 50, those are actually big differences, even though there's only the same number of IQ points of difference. But when you're looking at the actual differences you see in their life, it's not equal. but sometimes people will treat them as equal because they want it to be a certain scale in order to run certain statistical analyses, but I'm not going to trick you on a quiz or a test. And the third one is absolute zero, saying that things like heart rate, somebody could be dead, so you won't have anything at all, or speed of travel, you could be not moving at all. But a lot of things don't have an absolute zero, like temperature. Even though there's like a 0 degrees, it doesn't mean there's an absence of it. There's not an absence of temperature. So the type of scales, we've already mentioned, one is nominal. It's labeled a scale, but it's not really a scale because it doesn't contain any of these three properties at all. It basically just names things like males, females, Hispanic, Caucasian, African American. It puts people in a category, and you're assigned to like one of those things. This means that there are a lot of statistical operations that we just can't do. Like we can't give an average of gender, right? We have males and females. What is the average? What? You can't do like an average of that. You're just naming it, categories, giving you information. Then we have the ordinal scales, which just allows you to rank different individuals in the room. So maybe I do like rank in class, like who has like the top quiz score, like all the way down, and everybody's ranked in that way. And any analyses that I do is based on your rank, but it doesn't tell me anything about your scores or the differences between scores. And I'll show you why that would matter. I brought this today. Okay. So say we had scores of like, you had 100%, 98, 68, somebody got 40. All right, and you could rank 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, even this person, it would only look at their ranks, but there's only a 2% difference between these people, but 18% difference between these people. It doesn't give any information about like the differences in these scores, right? It only gives us information about the ranks, so we're missing out on a lot of information. Okay. But it does have the property of magnitude. This person had a higher grade than this person. So it has this property, but it doesn't have equal intervals because it's the same. Why doesn't like percent, like class grade, why wouldn't that have equal intervals?
What did you say, class grade?
Like class grade, like who could tell me again, what is equal intervals? Why wouldn't class grade have that property of equal intervals?
Like A's or like the letter grade?
Like a letter grade. Or like a letter grade or a percentage, either way. Why wouldn't that be equal intervals?
Because you might not have a student or the students that have the grade between like 98 and 68. Like there's no studying for 88%.
Right.
So,
Right.
interval.
Yeah, exactly. So it could be that the differences between like a 90% and 100% aren't the same as it would be for somebody who got a 40% versus 50%. They're not equal. They're like these psychological. It's not the same as it would be on a ruler, right? They're knowledge-based. You can't tell them that it was like double the amount or something like that. It's not. We can't say that they're equal. So yes, ordinal. The only property it has is a magnitude. It doesn't have. It does have. Grade does have an absolute zero. You can get a 0. You can get none correct. So that's a not good example. I just contradicted myself right there. Okay. It gets tricky. Interval scale. It has both magnitude and equal intervals. It's like temperature degrees of Fahrenheit or Celsius. You have higher degrees and lower degrees, but no absolute zero, no absence of temperature.
Another example for like.
Another example for interval.
Has no absolute zero.
Sometimes, when it comes to like psychological tests, like I said, a lot of people will use things like psychological measures as interval scales. For like Beck's depression inventory, for example, they will have, I think it's a 0 to 30 or something like that. But they will say that the differences are the equal intervals between a 2 and a 4 and a 6 and an 8. They'll say they're equal even though it's like controversial. As far as things that aren't in psychology, I can't really think of good examples. That's why in every textbook, you're going to see Fahrenheit. You could read every single textbook there is, and it's going to give the same example. Right. And especially we're reading about like psychology, right? I'm trying to think. I'll try to think. I'll try to think of more because I agree. Like, it's a cop out. I'll do a little Google search or come up. I'm going to ask some of my stats people, but that's a good question. And if I come up with more things, I will. I'll let you know. But you'll definitely know that maybe we might have some examples. I'm going through a bunch in class. I might have put something else up there that's interval, but I'll do some more looking into it. Yes.
Well, I think the other day you said something about like the way you feel, like saying like that you don't feel sad, like that's not possible because eventually at some point you do feel sad.
Right.
So it's like not the absence of feeling sad.
Right. So when I was talking about like
Sadness.
I was talking about sadness or Beck's depression inventory is not like an absence of sadness. And I think a lot of people will use these types of scales as interval, but the part that's controversial is whether or not they're equal intervals. But what's not controversial is that there's no absolute zero. We're not using those as ratio, right? So you'll see some people using it technically ordinal, but you'll see them using it as interval. But there is no absolute zero. You'll never see them used as ratio. There's, and again, the ratio, it has all three properties, like speed of travel, or yards gained by like a running back, or things of that nature. But you'll be able to do like statistical analyses that talks in ratios. Like he performed twice as well as them. He ran twice the distance as this other person. You have to have absolute zero to be able to talk in a ratio format like that. And here's a nice little chart for you, which just be kind of good to memorize, because these should be easy questions to get on exam. You just memorize what each of these, which properties they have. Okay. So we're going to go through some examples. So, guys got to pick a partner. You're going to be working with them. One person. It'll be okay.
I looked it.
You're like, oh, I hate you. Okay. Partner. Take out a sheet of paper. So you're going to write these down. Don't worry about getting them right or wrong. Here's the place to get them wrong. Here's the place to correct our thinking. Okay? Does everybody have a partner? Everybody have a partner? Okay. So for each item, I want you can have 3 people. Okay. Something that works in your little group. So for each item, I want you to say what properties that measure has and what type of scale that measure is. Okay?
With
so
scale?
What are the properties again? Who can tell me what the properties are? Magnitude, equal intervals, equal intervals, and absolute zero. And what are the scales?
Skills would be ratio, ordinal.
What's the other one?
Nominal.
So I want you to say what scale it is and what properties it has. Okay? Number 1.
Time. That may be absolute.
Just write it down. We're going to go through them and then we're going to come back. So give you some time. Argue it out.
That may be that one. Interval.
Well, you can't have 0 minutes, right?
No, but on a clock, no.
But it's not just about a clock, it's time in general.
Oh.
Like when you're saying it's time, it's not a clock, right? It's time itself,
Time.
not a clock. Oh, we're not talking about a clock here.
Talk about it either way in here. That's a good discussion. Is it time versus clock? Is there a difference between the two?
I think time is ratio. Because it can't have 0 minutes.
You can?
Well, I mean,
You can.
like I know.
Well, if we're talking about
I know zero can exist. Has zero can exist. Yeah. Because I know my class told me it's not whether it's you know, like somebody's gonna say a race where you can have zero benefits, but it's whether it can exist. Not that it's like super possible, you know, you think about it, but it can exist. And I think for time it will be an issue. Maybe for law, I wouldn't really have a time where it's 0 hours.
But I think it's for the time, like how you said, it's time. It's not the cost.
Oh, but should we talk about it in both ways?
Because has magnitude equal intervals, absolutely. Yeah, has to be weighted.
If it has an absolute zero, you're talking about the time intervals, right? I'm still with that.
Yeah, like,
Okay.
just time in general, like you can, there's a possibility.
Do you want us to go through them with the slides, or you're gonna?
Let's go through it, yeah.
Okay, do we go to the next one?
Who's still working on this one? Anybody still working? 25 more seconds.
Oh, that's the other slide.
Magnitude and it has zero.
It has absolute zero because it can be zero.
So it's weighted again. What is it? A ring?
A ring? It looks like it, right?
Okay, GRE text. It has magnitude.
All right, let's go to the second one. Two. It'll be an easy one.
Okay, so the next one. It has magnitude. Well, I don't know. But it doesn't have equal intervals. It's like the Anki text.
But it didn't have any.
Well, let's talk about sports. Sports can have equal intervals.
And you can get a zero.
I don't think.
I don't think because it has like a
Yeah, I think it's gonna get a zero because it's gonna be like. If you get a zero, doesn't mean you have no intelligence. I guess that's what we're talking about. So I think it might be.
it has magnitude.
I think it might be. For the magnitude, definitely. Because somebody can have
It
more.
has magnitude. Does it have all of them are they should be the same? I would say
Are you still working on this one?
oh no, it's always ranking, right?
Next one, mood ring.
Oh, okay.
Mood ring.
Es que
Okay, so I was like, what do you mean?
Until like what? It's too black.
Well, I guess you. Is that a mood ring?
A mood ring.
I actually think because you can be feeling sad, you can be feeling anxious, but sad is not bad.
I can say ordinal because it depends the color. It's gonna be
But isn't it just not where you're put into a category? Because you can't have, like, if you get like, you know how like red is like maybe you put like something like anger, and blue is like sad. Well, sad isn't better than angry. I think it might be added. I mean, not categories.
Yeah. Because if it's blue,
This, yeah, it's like blue means it's blue better than red.
But depends the color is
Yeah, because you know the colors are blue, so you can't say like, oh, blue is 2 times
better
better
than
than red.
red.
So
That's what I think.
if it's not,
Does anybody need more time on this one? GRE.
Is that the test itself or like your test score?
The test itself.
Okay.
The test score. Maybe the test score. The test score.
Test score?
Test score.
Everybody, did you see it?
has magnitude.
well, it has magnitude because you can say somebody did better than somebody else.
You're right. And it has like I don't know. It doesn't have any. What does that say? No, I know, but what I would say is
That's one of the properties of magnitude. I don't think that's actually fair. But
Anybody need more time on this one? Anybody need more time?
what does the ordinal say?
All right. This is the grade of meat. You guys aware of those? Like giving it prime or
I think it's fine.
here's, you have prime, choice, select, standard meats. Have you guys heard about that? Yeah. So how do they measure whether or not it's like prime?
Like the centeredness,
One of it is like the fat specs, and the other is like maturity and age. So they label these, meats at whether it's prime, choice, select, or standard based on those two properties. Okay. So what is that? Grades of meat.
What? Great. But what are we looking at?
can you say if it's better? But then wouldn't that matter if some people don't like regular? But I know what you're saying. Which one has more better?
Anybody need more time on this one? Nobody needs more time?
Yeah, it's ranked.
About 30 more seconds.
Interval.
It's right?
It's ranking.
No, that's what I think. I just think
I don't know. I think this is difficult because I think that it's like
Grades of meat, which is like prime, choice, select, based on age and maturity.
Estamos en la casa.
no, I'm sorry. That's what meant to
Great. How many children do you have? What is how scale in poverty?
that's one of the things. Yo no tengo hijos.
I feel like I have to all my brother's kids are all I'm not sure.
Does anybody need more time on this one?
I don't know what that was. Wait, isn't that
You can have zero. You have something that you can.
Great. We have more, but I just want to make sure we get through some of them today before class ends. So time. What do you think? Interval. Why is it interval? So we're talking about properties. Let's start here. Does it have magnitude? How so?
8 o'clock p.m. Well, you can say like 5 minutes is greater than 10 minutes.
Right. So you have this more that's greater or less than. What about equal intervals?
Yes.
Yes and no. Give me arguments for both. This is why we're questioning it in here.
Yes, because from 1 second to another second is the same amount of
Same amount of time.
From hour to hour. Yeah, but second to hour, it wouldn't be the same.
But it's not the same.
But you have to go by the same time. Like from 1 to 101 and from 1:30 to 1:31
Yeah,
is
sure
the
do.
same amount of time.
Let's say that again. Right?
So like from 1 to 101, like that time span, and then from 1:30 to 1:31, that's the same time span.
So you're the same. So a minute is the same no matter where it is on the clock.
Yeah.
And an hour.
An hour is different now.
So does anybody have an argument for how it's not equal? How time does not have equal intervals?
The last minute before you clock out of work.
What?
The last minute before you clock out of work.
It does last longer, doesn't it? Time ceases to exist at that point. I love that. But generally, people say there's equal intervals. But the thing about science and stuff is I want you to argue. I want you to think about it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're wrong if, like, the majority of people don't agree with you. Come up with a reason. I'm here. I'm listening. What about absolute zero?
No.
Yes and no. Okay.
There's not a lot of time.
But you can theoretically have 0 minutes.
You can't have 0 minutes. Time doesn't cease to exist that we're aware of.
Wouldn't it be easier if it was like in 24 hours? Because once you reach, like, in digital format, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 12, 13, and then back to 0.
Right.
And that's when your day would start again. But only if you were using 24 hours.
That's exactly the argument. People will say it depends on if you're using 12-hour clock or 24-hour clock.
But even if you're using 24 hours, it's just 0, 0 for 1 second. Then the next second is
Right. It's like
But it's still
midnight and then one.
Yeah, I don't think it
Well,
actually.
it doesn't really.
It's not a.
This
Stop.
is so weird though, because in my, statistics class, we put time as a ratio scale.
Right, because
Because you can have theoretically 0 minutes. It was like they put a question, something, it was about weight, and they put a newborn baby, and it was like, what kind of scale would you use? And we put ratio because he said theoretically you can have 0 pounds or 0 weight or 0 time or something like that.
right.
It has 0 time maybe on that.
0 time. It depends on how are you using time. What if I'm doing like a running race or something,
Stopwatch.
right? You could have like 0. So some of it, just on its own, just looking at it by itself, you may not be able to tell. You have to know in what context, where it gets tricky, and I'm not going to do some tricky thing on your exam or things like that. But part of my job is to get you to start thinking about these different things, right? So you could make different arguments based on the context, right? There could be time where, if you're using time, there could actually be 0. I mean, can you think of something? Like, how much time did you spend studying for this class last night?
0.
Some people put 0, okay? So that could be one time, right? So it depends on how you're using it. Are you using it at a clock? Are you using it at 1 p.m. versus 2 p.m.? A 24-hour clock or a 12-hour clock? These things kind of matter. So it's getting you to question things, think about it differently. But everybody's doing a great job.
So in general, what will you say? Ratio.
Depends on what you're using.
Well, this is what I'm saying. If I had something, I'm not going to trick you guys on it. Like, if I had an essay test or something like that where it was like a short answer, I want you to walk it out for me. Well, it could be this or it could be this, depending on what it is. But this is going to be multiple choice. So I'm not going to trick you.
At the time you apply a test, psychological test to someone, you use it as a ratio scale.
A ratio scale?
Yeah.
Probably, it depends, again, on the purpose of what you're using it for.
Like
How much time did you spend studying? You could do a ratio scale there, and it depends on what kind of properties. And I told you that a lot of these psychological measures, it's going to depend on what statistics that they're hoping to use. So they might put one so you can argue it to be in either category. You know what I mean? So the researcher is just saying, and you'll see that in a study, like a written study, you'll get to be able to say what scale of measurement they're using. And as somebody who's reviewing that material could be like, well, I see what they're doing, but maybe you shouldn't be doing it because of this. I'm just trying to get you to think critically as scientists, right? I don't want you to just be like, memorize, oh, nominal scale is this. I want you to start thinking about what it is and what that means and start looking around your world and be able to notice these different scales, be able, oh, that would be this type of scale, and this is why, right? And if I had a test and I had something that was confusing, you're like ordinal or interval, and you got it wrong, and you have an argument as what it is, come and see me. And if I agree with your argument, I think it's valid, you'll get the point for it. But it has to be valid.
Your test would be multiple choice or
Multiple
it would
choice.
Be all multiple choice
Or
it
true,
can
false,
be-
multiple choice. I would like to do short answer would be my favorite, but it's hard to have. What?
So if this would be the answer, it could be either one and you would get it right?
She's saying she's not going to put something there.
I'm not going to put something like this on the test where you could really argue it. I'm not saying, but for anything, any scale I could put up there, oftentimes you can make an argument for it. So if I mistakenly put something on there that is going to be like trickier than I thought it was going to be, and you come to my office and you're like, I got this wrong, but this is why I'm thinking of it, and you have a valid argument based on what you're saying here, I'll give you the point. and I'll applaud you for coming to my office and arguing. I like that. It's like the difference between, I think Dr. Ernst says, the difference between a training and education. I could train you. I could just memorize. I just want to memorize the definitions of these things. I want you to be able to think about it as a scientist. Okay? Ruler. We talked about this one already. What properties?
Range.
All of them. Mood ring, huh? Nominal. Who can tell me why?
Because the color is the mood.
Yeah, the color is the mood. So green, blue, red. Well, maybe it is. People will say, "Whoa, blue."
We can it be interval because it changes always the same from one to another color with the same.
So you could
What
have
is that
order.
argument? Because mood ring is just it measures heat.
That's exactly
So
right. Yeah.
if you could say like blue is a range from these numbers and then red is a range from this number,
This
you
is
could
so
go ahead and
smart. Again, if you just look it on the side, they're putting it different colors. You could say that's nominal. Okay. If you know how a mood ring works as far as temperatures, like sometimes like we have these like stress things that you put on, and I was always black because I'm always cold. You touch my hand and I'm freezing. I have like a sweatshirt in my office because I'm so cold. But yeah, I would always come up with like the same number, but it's measuring heat. So if you wanted to be like moreness about colors, about depending on body temperature, that I'm measuring body temperature. But if I'm just assigning color categories, then it would be nominal. Tricky, huh?
Okay, but doesn't it go by the heart rate too? Like the mood like changes by your whatever, like
It's not
your
really.
body?
It says it's a mood ring. This is another interesting thing. Okay, it says it is, but we're going to talk. We haven't got there yet. But we're also looking at validity. Who knows what validity is?
How measures what it's supposed
Is it measure what it's supposed to measure? You say it's a mood ring. Does it really measure mood? Does it really measure whether you're sad or happy? It measures body temperature, right? So it's not really measuring that. But people are claiming that's the case. That's like a hint of pseudoscience there for you.
So it's temperature, right?
That's what it really does. Even though they call it a mood ring, they sell it as a mood ring, everything like that. It doesn't really measure mood. It's actually an invalid instrument. Wait, everybody, I can't hear.
Go back to the rooted one.
The root?
You said you had output, but for a second you have zero. Don't include zero. If it doesn't have a measurement, it's gonna say.
Yeah, but it's nothing. It does have absolute zero, so it's ratio. You can have the absence, like, if there's air, there's like nothing. There's nothing, there's no length at all. Air. Is that it? One more, we have a couple more minutes. Theory.
Reading me.
Which one?
If it was the test, what was it going to be? Because I thought it was.
Let's go to the actual score of the test first.
The score can be original. If it has to zero, I'm going to be already.
But it's like the
That's
IQ
a
test.
good point. Like, theoretically, you can get everything wrong on the test, right? But they don't go to zero.
No, just like IQ test.
But I think, was it like 200?
600, right? 200.
So what do you mean? What if you just go over?
So then it doesn't.
So you could technically get zero. Like, it depends on how you're looking at it. If you're looking at it on their scoring, they don't have like a true zero in their scoring, even though they got zero right. But if I'm just looking at, without doing a standard score, just looking at the raw scores, which ones they get right, they could have a zero.
And isn't it kind of statistically impossible to get zero on a multiple choice test? Like even if you like guess it all the way through, or you still really.
The probability of that is very low, because at least by chance, if I gave you a test today and it was all Greek, and there were 4 answer choices in that, what, like, statistically, like, how many of them should you probably, like 20%, maybe.
At least one or two.
You're going to get some right by chance. However, like when we do the normal curve about how people score, there are some people in these extremes. It would be very rare, but somebody could maybe just get 1. It might be possible for somebody to actually get 0 correct, but for the most part, that would be so rare that the probability of that is so low that you would. Oh my gosh, I'm going so slow in this class.
So we have to take the test by Friday, right? The quiz.
No!
No quiz on Friday.
We're not finished covering this chapter. So I'm going to move it. I will let you guys know